Welcome to our discussion of 1102 Beginnings. I've met so many of you, but if I haven't met you yet, I am Dr. Kenefick. What I want to do is just begin to acclimate you to our course. I know that some of you have a strong background in terms of literary study, and some of you don't. I welcome you wherever you are on that spectrum. In this course, we are going to be looking at literature, which those of you who know me know how strongly I feel that this is a art that represents all of us. And I like to approach it not just academically, but also philosophically. That said, just so you know how we will approach everything that we study, we begin with literature that I've chosen from about 100 years ago. So we begin with Kate Chopin's Story of an Hour. We talk not only about that particular work, but we talk about the historical periods that gave birth to it, namely Victorianism and Romanticism. We move through a discussion of Kate Chopin's Story of an Hour into a period called modernism. And many of you have probably already studied T.S. Eliot. Perhaps you have studied Ernest Hemingway. They are the two modernists that for us represent that period. It is an explosive period that many of you will relate to. These artists created when they were 19, 20 years old. It's fascinating to read their works. We move from there, discussions of a modern world in terms of war and the Industrial Revolution, into a discussion of what we can call a bridge between the modern world and the postmodern world. We studied Jamaica Kincaid. She created a spectacular work called Girl. We discuss it in terms of love, which is a theme that runs throughout our course together. We move into a discussion of Popular Mechanics by Raymond Carver. It is a story that on the one hand can be alarming, on the other hand, it rings true of where we are in the postmodern world. We discuss poetry as well. We go over some work by Margaret Atwood called You Fit Into Me. We also discuss Sharon Olds' Rite of Passage, and we move from that into an ending place for our course, where we discuss what I believe is a work that represents where we are headed, and that is a work called Yours by Mary Robeson. So that is the overview of our artistic discussion. The very first work that you're reading is Kate Chopin's Story of an Hour. On the one hand, it seems simplistic. You have a plot that follows a logical flow. It does have a surprise ending, but we can imagine that it could easily be made into a movie or a television show. On the other hand, what I want you to understand about it is that it broke ground. At the turn of the century, there were still Victorian norms, and it was by no means average for a female writer to create a fictional work that discussed one spouse being happy that the other spouse had died. And so this was poisonous, even blasphemous for Kate Chopin's age. It represents what we call the zeitgeist or the spirit of the age of Victorianism. In my professor's notes that are tandem to this discussion on video, you will notice that I use words like traditionalism and artificiality to describe that period. Of course, it is much more complex than two terms could advocate, but you will come to understand that Kate Chopin was growing out of a period that was traditional almost to a fault. And we will discuss the gender roles, we'll discuss the themes that point toward that. The competing zeitgeist or spirit of the age was Romanticism. You don't want to think of Romanticism in the colloquial terms. You don't want to see it as being about love and roses and Valentine's Day. Romanticism, when we speak of literature, the best word that I can give you is realistic. It eventually morphed into a period that promoted Gothicism. You can think of Frankenstein and different works that really were bizarre for the period. Romanticism began at its birth to be about a realistic look at life. The Romantics believed that if a marriage was bad, it wasn't happy, it wasn't full of love, you should be able to talk about that in art. We had a call to arms for almost a naturalistic vision where writers and artists and dancers would become childlike again. We see that in Kate Chopin's work because she does talk about the difficult things. You'll notice that in the story, she says that she loved him. We have the words, she never looked but save with love upon him. So don't make a mistake. She cared for him. It's just that she also wanted her freedom. When you are asked to talk about symbols in Kate Chopin's Story of an Hour, please remember that a symbol can easily be defined as something that you can touch that stands for an idea that you can't touch. A good example would be to say that as a student, you can touch your desk. The desk itself is symbolic of learning, of trying to become something better intellectually. In Kate Chopin's Story of an Hour, we have many, many symbols. Some of you have already noticed that we have the symbol of the heart. The heart is ailing. Kate Chopin clearly tells us that Mrs. Mallard has a weakened heart. She also has a weakened marriage. Her love is not involved, and so there's a parallel there. We have the chair that she sits in when she looks outside and she says, free, free, free again. She is remembering that from this point on, she will get to choose to live her life as she wants to. And many critics say that the chair represents rebirth, almost like a womb that she will grow out of. When at the end, Mrs. Mallard walks down the steps and Kate Chopin tells us that she carries herself like a goddess of victory. Many critics say that she has experienced rebirth and she is walking down the steps now into her new life. The idea behind looking at symbols in a work of literature is simplistic. When you are confused by what an artist is saying, and perhaps Kate Chopin is easy, T.S. Eliot will not be. But when you are looking at what an artist is trying to promote, trying to say through art, symbols give us touchstones. So you can say, I may not understand the overall idea, but I can understand this one concept. Remember that art is something that requires not just the artist creation, but also what you bring to it. You are the living portion of this relationship. Every time that you read something that another artist has written, you make it better because you keep it alive. And we will talk about that more philosophically throughout our course together. All of that is your introduction to Kate Chopin's Story of an Hour and our course. As always, reach out to me. Let me know what questions you have. I relish your company. I welcome you into my classroom, my office hours. We can FaceTime. However you want to be in touch, I am there for you. Have a terrific rest of your week. Let me know your questions and concerns.